beautiful people, welcome back to the African Comic Guy, and today we get to talk about another one of my favorite DC characters, and that is none other than the Martian Manhunter. One of my favorite characters, and I can't wait to talk about him. But before we do, as always, let's cue the intro. The Martian Manhunter is actually a superhero. He's commonly known as John Jones, and he's a superhero who appears in American comics published by DC Comics. He was actually created by Joseph Somaxon, I think I'm pronouncing his name wrong, and another writer called Joe Sutter. Now, this character first appeared in the story The Martian Manhunter from Mars in Detective Comics 225, like you see up here. Now, that was back in 1955, and he's actually part of the 7 original Justice League members. And actually, one of the most powerful members in the Justice League, not only in the Justice League, but actually in all of DC. He's one of the most powerful superheroes. Now, he actually first appeared on TV in a show called Justice League of America, played by an actor called David Ogden Stiers. He also appeared in Smallville, one of my favorite shows of all time. If you haven't watched it, you can watch it. I do believe it's on Max. Don't quote me, but it should be on HBO Max. Now, there he was played by an actor called Phil Morris, and later on, he also appeared in Arrowverse. I loved Arrowverse, especially in the beginning. We're going to talk about Arrowverse down the line. Outstanding series, kind of not so towards the end, but like the first actually the first 5 seasons of all the Arrowverse shows. You know, The Flash, Green Arrow, Supergirl. You know, they all kind of mesh into the Arrowverse, and so their initial 4 or 5 seasons were outstanding. The last, awful. Now, in the Arrowverse, he was played by a gentleman known as Harewood. Now, he also appeared in Zack Snyder's Justice League, played by Harry Lennox. Right? If you haven't seen it, he appeared in the middle to Lois Lane, and at the end, actually revealing himself to Bruce Wayne as the Martian Manhunter. Now, funny thing, he appeared actually in the previous 3 movies. He appeared in Man of Steel as General Swarnick. We just didn't know that he was Martian Manhunter. He also appeared in Batman versus Superman, still as General Swarnick. This entire time, we didn't know he was the Martian Manhunter. That's Zack Snyder leaving breadcrumbs, and we finally get him in Justice League. Now, obviously, the Martian Manhunter, his physical, basically, he embodies this character because in his natural form, he's green, right? As you see here. Now, he's been depicted in different comics looking differently, but he's always been green, especially when he's in his full natural form, and you can see some of his natural form here. He's always been green, and but he always reverts back to his human form. And in his human form, he's actually a detective. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. He's actually a detective, but he chooses, while being a member of the Justice League, to have a form that resembles a human being, even though you can clearly tell he is not human. He In his natural form, he does not wear anything, you know what I mean? But in his Justice League form, he almost has like a suit with a cape, you know? And he basically looks like a superhero, you know? Still green, just having like a suit. Even though we know that suit is organic, he creates it naturally, you know what I mean? So he has the powers to do that. But he's always green. He's very tall. He's as tall as Superman. He's as strong, maybe not as strong as Superman, but he is extremely strong. Now he's had different backstories. He's had stories in different comics where he landed on Mars because, I mean, he landed on Earth because he was chased away from Mars because he was running away from a fight, kind of like a tribal fight between the Green Martians and the White Martians. Now the White Martians wanted to subjugate, kill, and destroy the Green Martians. He ended up being the sole um, Green Martian left on Mars and ended up on Earth. There are certain other stories where he actually ran away from Mars when an alien invasion, you know, basically invaded Mars, trying to kill Martians. And he realized that this invasion, um, or these aliens that came from deep space, basically moved from one planet to the next, literally destroying every planet they come across, getting all the natural resources that they can, and then destroying it. So he runs away to Earth once he realizes stop, um, the next stop um, for these aliens is actually Earth. So he comes to Earth thinking he's going to warn humans of the impending invasion. Next thing you know, he's captured by the military, which, how many times have we heard that? He's experimented on, he is tortured, and eventually gets rescued by the Justice League because because he is telepathic, he ends up being able to communicate and they rescue him. So there's different stories, different backstories, different writers have, basically. They've played along with this character. He's appeared in different comics. He's actually even also appeared in Justice Society of America, and uh, this particular league or this particular team is based in mid 19 what between 1940s and 1960s. You know what I mean? So he's appeared in different timelines along different writers. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. Now, one of the cool things about the Martian Manhunter, John Jones, is the fact that his powers allow him to do a variety of different things. Like he can actually morph his body into weapons. Right? He can use his body as weapons. He can turn his arms into whatever he basically thinks of. Right? He can turn himself into a creature. Right? To battle another creature. He has so many different powers, and we're about to talk about those powers in a little bit. But he's one of DC's most powerful superheroes because not only is he extremely strong, extremely intelligent, but at the same time he can incorporate so much, right? His Martian powers allow him to do so many different things, and we're about to talk about them. Now, one of the cool things about him is the fact that he can actually turn invisible. He turns invisible. It's one of the coolest things. If you watch, especially with DC animation, you watch him and recently um, fighting Doomsday. Doomsday is so strong, right? But the Martian Manhunter, while fighting Doomsday, turns invisible. It's one of the coolest things. Another thing he has is he's telepathic. He uses telepathy to not only read minds, but also screw with you because he can literally do so much to your mind. He can wipe your memory. He can read your mind, read your memories, read everything about you, but at the same time he can scramble them if he wants to. So one of the cool things about him is he coming from Mars to Earth. He actually, because on Mars um, according to some of these stories, they always did it. Like to them, in reading someone's mind, reading another Martian's mind is not invading their privacy, right? Coming to Earth, he had to learn that not everybody likes the fact that you can read what I'm thinking about. You can read my memories. So he actually had to learn to that was an invasion of privacy. The same way as, going into someone's room without knocking is an invasion of privacy. Somebody reading your mind without telling you is an invasion of privacy. And he had to learn that on Earth, we actually value our privacy, especially up here. So he had to learn to actually work with that, but at the same time also learn that he can use it to gain an advantage, especially when he's fighting criminals, right? He can read their minds in order to find out either secrets or find out what they're about to, what they're planning, or also when Justice League members have been basically kidnapped or basically kept somewhere. He's able to use telepathy to read into minds and figure out where. But at the same time, he's learned to link these minds and can find whoever he's looking for because he's been able to link them. And it's a really cool, really cool power that he has. And another thing with his telepathy, not only can he link people, meaning we don't have to communicate, right? If we're somewhere where we actually require stealth, so basically what he does is he's linking each league's member or he's linking everybody's mind together so they're communicating through their minds. But at the same time, he can astral project, meaning he can project forms in front of you, make you believe what you're seeing is what you're seeing. And at the same time, he can also create mental barriers. So let's say if there's another telepath who wants to gain control of your mind, he can actually create a shield to whoever he wants to block and protect you. It's one of the coolest things that a telepath, especially of his stature, can do. Another cool thing is he actually possesses another power that a lot of superheroes don't have, and that's the power to actually be able to see across the electromagnetic spectrum, including X-rays. I think very few superheroes can. I think Superman can in a weird way, but not to that extent, not to the Martian's extent. And in other versions of the Martian Manhunter, he can actually also project beams. They almost look like Superman's beams. So he can actually do that. Now, you don't see him doing that often. It's very few issues that he's actually been depicted being able to shoot out beams. But that is a power that he possesses in certain stories in the DC Comics. Now, another ability which is not necessarily a superpower is his detective skills. Coming from Mars as a Martian Manhunter, he actually has incredible detective skills, which he brings down to Earth, where he actually now in his natural Earth form. Remember, there are three forms that he always carries: natural Martian form, where he's just fully green. There's his Justice League form, where he almost looks like he's wearing a suit. And then whenever he's on Earth, he's always been depicted as a detective, and he's actually a pretty good detective. And he's bringing his natural skill set, something that he brought on from Mars, because on Mars, the Martian Manhunter, that's not a nickname. That's not the title. That's who he was. That's his job title. He was able to hunt Martians. So it's this detective skill that allows him, when he comes on Earth, to actually find something that he connected with, that was natural to him. And it came natural to him because he actually became a pretty good detective. Along with his skill set as a detective, he also happens to have fighting skills. Fighting skills that he actually used while fighting the white Martians on Mars. And that allows him, when he comes to Earth, while fighting criminals on Earth, he can incorporate so many different abilities. But as a detective, there's so much he can't do, right? So he's trying to look human. He's trying to act human. So there's certain things he can't do. But because he has a skill set in fighting, he can apply certain aspects of his fighting skills while embodying a human or a detective, and not give away the fact that he is alien or a superhero. Now, we've talked about his abilities, which he has, almost sounds like he has a limitless fond of abilities. But he, like every superhero, he has a weakness. And with him, it happens to be fire. He has a weakness for fire. And it's almost like a phobia. So whenever he's around fire, he just freezes. And in the comics, you've actually seen him just sit there, and it almost, he's incredibly vulnerable at that moment because anything can happen to him because he can't defend himself whenever he's around fire. And in so many different comics, you've seen villains, including a Martian called Malafa'ak, who He's actually one of Martian Manhunter's biggest um, foes or villains in the DC animation Justice League Doom. It's actually really cool. It's a really cool animation. You can actually find it on HBO Max. You could see Malafa'ak. Basically, he in I think he tricked while the Martian Manhunter was actually in his human form, his detective form. Malafa'ak was able to embody a girl, right? So they're at a bar. So John Jones and his detective friends at a bar, drinking or just hanging out, and Malafa'ak, who now looks like a girl, buys him a drink, and John goes over to her and says, "Hey, it's a work night, like a school night. So I'm not drinking." And then they start having a conversation, um, and then John starts realizing, they're wait, I feel like I know you from somewhere. And then Malafak tells him, if you look a little deeper, you might know who I am. And once he uses his Martian power, telepathy, he realizes, oh, this is Malafa'ak. They start having this conversation while he takes a sip, right, of whatever she or Malafa'ak got him. And what he didn't know was he drunk champagne that was infused with magnesium. And once he drank it, the magnesium was actually starting to come out his pores. And all Malafa'ak did was just light it on fire. So he basically was going, unless somebody would put him out or figure out an antidote, which the Justice League figured it out, he was going to burn forever because his body would keep secreting this magnesium, which instantly catches fire even underwater. His biggest fear is fire. And I remember one time Batman told him, he has like a 23 pounds of a Kryptonian rock for Superman, but all it takes for the Martian is just a matchstick. Think about how crazy that is. Just having a matchstick, a lighter. That's the coolest thing, but that's his biggest fear. Now, personally, the Martian Manhunter is one of my not just a favorite character in DC Comics, but I think a lot of people's favorite character because in DC, in the Justice League, he's almost like the heart and soul of the Justice League. Because number one, being on Earth, he's the only one of his kind, right? He lost his family. In so many stories, he lost his entire family. His wife, he had two daughters, and he lost them because they were killed by the Martian Manhunters in one backstory, and another backstory they were killed by an invading alien force. So he's lost everything. Comes to Earth and finds these superheroes who now become his family, but at the same time, he becomes the conscience of the Justice League because it constantly has to remind them of, you almost have to check your power, right? Because you can lose everything because he's lost everything, right? He's the only one of his kind. He doesn't have anything else to fall back on. So he becomes the Justice League conscience. So he becomes for the Justice League almost the Justice League's heartbeat. So when you watch him, especially you've seen him a lot in DC animation, even in comics, you realize that basically this league, the Justice League, would be wouldn't be what it was and what it is without him. You know what I mean? And he's, like I said, being one of the founding members of the Justice League, um, he brings so much to the league. With the Martian Manhunter, the Justice League has an incredible advantage in any fight that they're in because, like I said, one of his biggest abilities is him being a telepath. And that power alone allows him to win so many fights without even lifting a finger. I can't wait to see him in film. I loved seeing him in Supergirl. I think in Supergirl, even though I'm not a huge fan of Supergirl. I hated the writing. I think I've said it before. You can do a lot with good, good casting, good directing, and good writing, but the writing was just awful. It really was. Like if you watch The Flash, the first 5 seasons, if you watch Green Arrow, the first 5 seasons, you're like, dude, outstanding writing, And those shows became extremely popular. But towards the end, I don't know what happened. I don't know if they lost the budget, disappeared. I don't know what happened, but you could tell the writing just went to crap, and those shows became a laughing stock, right? And ended up like with the Flash. The Flash honestly could have way more seasons than it did, but it's just people got tired of watching these monotonous, this boring, this oh. Same thing with Green Arrow. Green Arrow to me, the show was outstanding, and then, but I would love to see the Martian Manhunter in the movies, and we got a glimpse, just a hint of him in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Come on, DC. Come on, Warner Brothers. Come on. Allow this man to finish his story. Give us what we want. And I promise you, you give us what we want, you will get what you want, which is revenue, which is money. Just give us what we want. But I can't wait to see Martian Manhunter in movies. I am certain that he will be in future DC movies. He has to be, because if there's a future Justice League movie, you have to have the Martian Manhunter. Like the stories have to line up. So I can't wait. I always say I think it's your turn to actually look into the Martian Manhunter. Go into DC Comics. Figure out what comic books you can read. Go into DC Animation. You can watch Justice League, Justice League Unlimited. You can watch Young Justice, right? You can see him in all these animated shows if you actually want to understand the Martian Manhunter. So I implore you, if you do like comics and DC Comics, check out the Martian Manhunter. I'm pretty sure you'll end up loving him just as much as we do, because he embodies DC Comics. But anyway, as always, it's the African Comic Guy signing off. See you guys on the next one. Peace.